Some politicians choose to reach out to communities and hopefully benefit electorally from outreach by explaining how their policies help Americans at large and sometimes specifically the group they're talking to. Sometimes it's about appealing to the interests of the audience members that you're speaking to. And sometimes, politicians take a different approach and just openly, brazenly, and blatantly insult the exact group that they're talking to, hoping that they can insult them into getting more support. Now, I'm describing a speech that Trump held that could not have gone worse, from two back-to-back speeches, actually. First at a summit about fighting anti-Semitism, and then at the Israeli-American Council National Summit. And he was really fixated at these speeches on the idea that he's been treated poorly by Jewish voters, that he's been wronged, and that not enough of you support me. How dare you? It was all very uncomfortable to watch. Lots of clips to go through, starting with this one.
With all I have done for Israel, I received only 24% of the vote, but I understood that. That was in 2016. And, it's one of those things. I thought I'd do much better. I happen to have a Jewish daughter. I have a Jewish son-in-law. I have 3 Jewish grandchildren. I thought I'd do much better. But I only got 24%.
Think about that. Think about that. He gives it all away. No, there's more. There's more to vote on than whether or not you have Jewish relatives, family members, etc. Imagine saying, I only got 24%, but I have a Jewish son-in-law. What? It doesn't make any sense unless you have the values that Trump does. And it just goes on and on. Here's another clip.
Honestly, you ought to have your heads examined. You ought to have your heads examined.
He said this hundreds of times now. If you're a Jewish Democrat, you should have your head examined.
And those votes may be necessary for us to win. I say us to win because we're in this together. But who are these people? Who are the 60% that would vote? And I really believe that bad things, very bad things are going to happen. And I'll put it to you very simply and as gently as I can. I wasn't treated properly by the voters who happen to be Jewish. I don't know, do they know what the hell is happening? If I don't win this election, and the Jewish people would really have a lot to do with that if that happens, because at 40%, that means 60% of the people are voting for the enemy.
Oh my gosh. We are so appreciative of the thousands and thousands of people who have been subscribing every single day. So let's keep it going. Our race to 1 million subscribers. We're getting so close. Any of you who haven't already, please do click that subscribe button. Back to the video. And this led correctly to headlines like this. Trump says if he loses election, Jewish voters would have a lot to do with it. Imagine going in front of any group. In this case, he's trying to appeal to Jewish voters and thinking, how do I motivate them to come out to vote? How do I motivate people in this room and outside of it to vote for me in this election? How about I say that anyone who doesn't vote for me should have their head examined? How about I say, if I lose, it's going to be your fault, okay? I'm going to blame you. And let me I wasn't expecting to do this, but let me see if I can find this clip of Kamala Harris at the National Association of Black Journalists event, where she gives a very different answer on a question about how she'd appeal to black voters specifically. So you're getting asked about a certain identity group. How would you win over some of the black voters who are voting for Trump? Trump's approach is saying, well, they're complete idiots if they don't vote for me. They need to get their head examined. You're going to cost me the election if enough of you don't vote for me. Versus.
So I appreciate the spirit of the question, but I'll tell you, I've often been asked this question in a way that I've had to respond by first saying, that I think it's very important to not operate from the assumption that black men are in anybody's pocket. Black men are like any other voting group. You got to earn their vote. So I'm working to earn the vote, not assuming I'm going to have it because I am black, but because the policies and the perspectives I have understands what we must do to recognize the needs of all communities. And I intend to be a president for all people. Specifically as it relates to what we need to do, to your point around economic opportunity. Yes, I started way before I was at the top of the ticket.
And she goes on, because we reviewed all this, she goes on to talk about small businesses and how her tax plan will benefit small businesses. So one of the things she's thinking about with some of those black men who were asked about who are supporting Trump is, hey, I have a plan if you're hoping to start a business or to make that more possible for you, more doable, more realistic, and goes through policy proposals as to how people's lives could be made better under her policies. Trump just insults people. That's all he has.
But look, this is the most important election in the history of the
This is at another event. You're going to think you're hearing things twice. This is another event yesterday.
United States, and it's also the most important election in the history of Israel. The United States election is the most important election in the history of Israel, actually. If you think about it, how crazy does that sound? But it's true. With all I have done for Israel, I received only 24% of the Jewish vote. Now think of this. I really haven't been treated very well, but that's the story of my life. True. Think of it.
You're at an event. This event, I'm pretty sure, is the fighting against anti-Semitism event. And of course, he, I'm sure, read a teleprompter speech that included the importance of opposing anti-Semitism, even though he has this insanely prominent record of associating with anti-Semitism. But we'll leave that aside for this discussion. And he chooses to spend his time, instead of prioritizing that, prioritizing policy proposals that could benefit people's lives, he spends it saying, I've been treated so poorly. It's me who you should care about. I'm the victim. I've been wronged. At this event, too, he blames Jewish Americans if he loses.
But I will put it to you very simply and gently. I really haven't been treated right, but you haven't been treated right because you're putting yourself in great danger, and the United States hasn't been treated right. So if I don't win this election, and I've been very good, you know, they say Trump's been right about everything. I've been right about a lot of things. Even Ted will admit that. I've been right about a lot of things that a lot of people said, no, that won't happen, but a lot of bad things happened, and some good things I've been right about, too. And I only want to be, so I'm not going to call this as a prediction, but in my opinion, the Jewish people would have a lot to do with a loss. If I'm at 40%, if I'm at 4, think of it, that means 60% are voting for Kamala, who in particular is a bad Democrat. The Democrats are bad to Israel, very bad. They'll never change because they have a section of their party now which has become amazingly and quickly very powerful vote-wise. I mean, Chuck Schumer is a Palestinian. Who would have thought that was going to happen? What the hell happened to him? I saw him the other day. He was dressed in one of their robes. Now, that'll be next.
What? Another incoherent rant there from Trump. But I guess I would pose this to him. If you keep asserting that the conclusion you believe to be true seems unbelievable, maybe it's because your premises, maybe it's because the thesis that you're working with is unbelievable. Meaning, he's building this argument about how Jewish voters could never vote for Kamala Harris because of a bunch of points he'll make, many of which are dishonest, distorted, and delusional. So maybe the problem is not that the conclusion makes no sense, thus it must be Jewish voters who are they're just wrong in the brain, as he's saying. Maybe it's you who is wrong about the reasoning you're using to get to that conclusion that you find to be unbelievable, being whatever percentage of support he has. But he is incapable of doing introspection and going, oh, maybe the reason this seems so hard to believe is because it is hard to believe, because the mountain of lies I've had to tell to make this conclusion, the one I'm working with, are just that. Lies. Here's more.
Bad news, a poll, I just told you how good the polls are, but we need every vote we can get. The current polling has me with Jewish citizens, Jewish people that's supposed to love Israel. After having done all of that, having been the best president, the greatest president by far, a poll just came out. I'm at 40%. That means you got 60% voting for somebody that hates Israel. And I say it's going to happen. It's only because of the Democrat hold or curse on you. You can't let this happen. 40% is not acceptable because we have an election to win.
Imagine if any other politician said anything 1% like this. Actually, we have a good example. After running an entire campaign where he did talk about the issues and specifically appealed to, through policy, black voters, President Biden made an inappropriate, uncalled for joke where he said, if you don't vote for me or if you vote for Trump, you're not black. That brought onto him a lot of criticism and justified criticism and got a ton of coverage fairly. But then that remark, again, wrapped up in a broader context of not saying stuff like that, probably got more coverage than this will, which is Trump going further, definitely, and just completely off the rails consistently, saying the only reason, if you're Jewish, you could vote for a Democrat is because there's a curse put on you. You're cursed. Your brain needs to be examined. How deranged is that? We've heard it before, so we've heard it. All right, move on. No. Remember how he's an adult running for president, and we should judge him as such. Then off of that topic, he said this about reinstating his Muslim ban.
Support the foreign jihad sympathizers and Hamas supporters from our midst. We will get them out of our country. I will ban refugee resettlement from terror-infested areas like the Gaza Strip. And we will seal our border and bring back the travel ban. You remember the famous travel ban? We didn't take people from certain areas of the world because I didn't want to have people ripping down and burning our shopping centers and killing people. But we're not taking them from infested countries. Support the
We're not taking them from infested countries. Infested. He used to call them S-hole countries, now infested. When you see and hear stuff like this from Trump, know, as disgusting as it is a sign of his own desperation. He's grabbing back into the worst parts of history for advice. Advice on how you scare people into voting against their interests. How you scare people into believing that the only way they as an individual can thrive is if other people suffer. That the only way they can feel safe is if others are alienated, demonized, and dehumanized. The only way they can feel seen by their representatives is if it's contrasted against an oppressed group. And he's using the oldest tricks in the book to do that with his rhetoric, all while presenting a flimsy incoherent policy vision than this.
A spectacular woman, a beautiful woman. I'm not allowed to say that anymore because, it usually puts you out of politics, but I've said much worse than that. But she's a beautiful woman, and
yeah, we know. We remember. You remember when you said that you sexually assault women and you bragged about it, grabbed by the you know what, and then a few years later you're found liable for doing just that. So it was all locker room talk, right? It was just a joke. Oh, but then a jury finds that you did that. So it wasn't. It wasn't really a joke. But the crowd laughs. Gonna leave it there. Let me know what you thought in the comments. Support the show by clicking the join button below.